it's not the greatest day for flying in South Florida, but I'm super excited about my flight up to LaGuardia today. Come with me. I'm approaching the PBI airport. As I am with all flights I take, I'm all fired up, but concerned that the weather will be poor in both the climb and descent. But I've got a shimmer of hope for a thrill. I think it will happen. And to make it happen, I need to get out of this car. All right, I've arrived at the PBI airport. It is windy out here. Looks like departures are heading out over the ocean because that's the direction the wind is actually blowing in today. All departures are flying into the wind. Let's head inside. All right, let's head on over to TSA. That's an Airbus A321 behind me, and so many of my flights have been on A321s, especially flying into and out of LaGuardia, but today, my flight is being operated by a different aircraft type, a 737-900. I can't wait, something different. Okay, my 737 is inbound from LaGuardia. It's gonna land in a few minutes. I'm so happy it's a 737. I've flown on way too many A321s recently. Runway 10 left is being used for arrivals like this plane and for departures like this plane, but I'm here for this plane, my plane. It was delivered to Delta in 2018, making it a fairly new aircraft for the Delta fleet. This is an ER aircraft. ER stands for Extended Range. Extended range is really not needed for the short run up the USA's East Coast today. Winglets help with range, and this plane can be configured in an all-economy configuration. Because of that, there's an extra door between the wing and the rear door, but for this plane, the door is plugged in since Delta has a 3-class layout on the inside with less seats than an all-economy layout. That's it right there, the 737-900 that's going to take us up to LaGuardia. Now, the weather, as you can see here, is not the greatest, and I've chosen a seat on the right-hand side of the aircraft because LaGuardia is landing on runway 22 with right traffic. You know what that means, right? It means that runway 13 is the departure runway, which leads to departing traffic heading east, so we can fly to the west of the airport up the Hudson River, then swing around to land on runway 22. Okay, no head-on view of this 737-900. There's just a wall in front of the aircraft, so this is my best view here. I'll be sitting on the other side of the aircraft. Hopefully we do fly up the Hudson River with Manhattan on the right side. That should be amazing. That helps prevent the airplane from tilting if too much cargo is loaded in the rear. You can also see the door plug in the aft, which has been in the news a lot these days. And what's also not covered very often in media are the missing windows right around the engine. Again, seats to avoid because there's no window there. Generally, those are air conditioning ducts that run along the fuselage of the aircraft, and they need to be there so that air conditioning can actually get to the top of the aircraft and make the cabin more comfortable. But with no window there, how would you want to sit there? You can see those missing windows under the ADA on this Air Canada 737. Okay, the flight is now boarding here in the very crowded terminal at PBI. We will be right there in a matter of minutes. Let's head on over to LGA. To keep the boarding process flowing, this close-up view just lasts a matter of seconds before entering the plane. My seat is in the very back. I'm passing by the seats with the misaligned windows due to the 737 door plugs. Straining to look out won't be as nice as the seat that I chose with a very well-aligned window on the back of the plane. But the most important decision regarding seat selection had to do with the forecasted winds at LaGuardia at the time of my arrival. The wind will be out of the south, nearly due south, and that means it's favorable for runways 22 and 13. When that happens, 22 is the arrival runway and 13 is the departure runway, and arrivals on vectors from the southwest like us can expect a right traffic pattern onto the final approach course. This usually means flying up the Hudson. Here's our route from the southwest. It's time for pushback onto the ramp between the two concourses here at PBI, and I am not happy with the raindrops on the window. It makes seeing out and focusing very difficult. If it were only easy to switch flights to a clear weather day, that would be ideal, but sometimes I just need to fly on certain days. The flights that I take are the flights that I need to take and are not specifically designed for this channel. So I like to present to you the way things are in my life with a highly detailed analysis of each airborne journey.
Welcome aboard, and thank you for choosing Delta. The health and safety of our customers and crew is our #1 priority and a shared responsibility of everyone on board. So before we depart, please pay attention to this important message.
The tug has been removed and we're starting our engines so we can move under our own power. We need to leave the ramp area and enter the active taxiway system under the guidance of a ground controller in the air traffic control tower. I just can't wait until we speed along the runway. The fast-moving air will remove the water from the window. I've taken the route that we're going to take several times now, so if you want a really clear view of it, check out some of my older videos. Our goal is to get to runway 10 left, and taxiway Charlie gets us there. It's a straight run for the longest runway at PBI. In a few moments, we'll have 10,001 feet of runway to use, but to get there, we need to cross the 6,931-foot long runway 1432. Clearance across this runway is only provided once the ground controller ensures that the runway is clear of aircraft either taking off, landing, or on approach. Once we're on the other side of the runway, we just continue along to the very end as we're asked to monitor the tower frequency, that's the runway controller, who will tell us to enter the runway. What's about to happen is very interesting. As we get ready to enter the runway for takeoff, on final approach is a Gulfstream 4 coming in from Jamaica. The controller's plan is for us to take off right before the G4 lands, and as we turn the corner, my eyes are looking out for this plane since my side lets me see the final approach course. However, due to the rain on the window and the less than ideal weather, I can't see the plane, but it's somewhere and pretty close to the airport as we line up for takeoff. But because another plane landed just before we enter the runway, we have to wait in position for the previous arrival to vacate the runway before we're issued takeoff clearance. This means that the G4 on final approach is getting closer and closer to us. We have to take off as soon as possible for this G4 to land. We're issued takeoff clearance, but it's too late. We're blocking the runway and are not moving fast enough yet, so the controller has no choice but to tell the G4, which is really close behind us, to go around. This means that the G4 will have to abort its landing. This presents a conflict because if the G4 starts to climb while flying straight ahead, eventually it'll be right over our 737, and in a few moments, we too will be airborne climbing right under the G4. But there is a solution here. The controller has asked the G4 to climb and turn to the right. This way, the airspace at the end of the runway will be clear for us to fly the standard climb out, which will call for us to fly runway heading and climb. The conflict separation work that the controller did will actually allow for us to see the G4 off of our right wing as it climbs south of us on the missed approach. I'll point it out once it comes into view. Our climb itself calls for us to fly runway heading toward Lake Worth Lagoon and the barrier island of Palm Beach before we fly over the Atlantic Ocean. After a few miles, we'll turn toward the northeast toward New York City, our destination. What a great climb on this 737-900ER. We're about to leave the airport property and fly over Interstate 95, and I'm looking for that Gulfstream that performed a missed approach because of us. The controller had the pilot turn to the right. There it is. It's around our altitude now, but we're climbing rapidly and will be higher than it soon. It's flying away from us by around a 30-degree angle, so it won't present a conflict at all. Good work by the controller, and for us, we need to switch over to the departure controller who will guide our climb. We're about to fly over Lake Worth Lagoon, which separates the mainland from Palm Beach Island. The Intracoastal Waterway runs the length of the lagoon. The lake is a popular place for boating, and some very large private yachts can be seen in the water here. Our nose is pointed to a point just a few blocks north of the Mar-a-Lago resort. We're looking south and we can see the shoreline leading to Miami, but I'm noticing the rough seas of the Atlantic Ocean down there. I don't think it's a good day for swimming. The rain we had encountered while on 95 has ceased, but it's still windy outside, and that is clearly evidenced by the big waves. Despite the wind, I found the climb to be quite smooth up here. Offshore, we can see many whitecaps. I'm taking advantage of what I can see now because pretty soon we'll be in the clouds. After proceeding straight out for a bit, we turn to the left on course to New York City. The first half of our flight is over the water, and we'll join land around Wilmington, North Carolina, but there really wasn't much to see once we made landfall. The view below was just clouds. It was disappointing, but I was happy to be able to see the moon very clearly. But I'm hopeful we'll see more by looking up, and I did, like this Delta A321 flying from LaGuardia, our destination, to Orlando. Once we got further north, I saw a Piedmont Embraer 145 flying from Philadelphia to Richmond. We're on the Courier arrival now to LaGuardia, which is designed for flights like ours from the southwest. Typically, we would see the Jersey Shore on the right and Philadelphia on the left, but it's a cloudy day here in the northeast, just like practically the entire flight today. Now, I checked ahead, and the wind is nearly coming from due south at LaGuardia. That translates to runway 22 being the landing runway, and runway 13 being the departure runway, with arrivals like us coming from the Courier arrival procedure receiving radar vectors to the northeast west of LaGuardia. If the weather is good, the controller will often have aircraft just follow the Hudson River northbound at around 4,000 feet, but today the base of the clouds is just around 4,000, so that's not going to be possible. The river needs to be in sight before we get to New York City, and that can't happen until once we get over New York Bay. Instead, today we'll rely on radar vectors from the approach controller. Essentially, the controller can have us fly over the Hudson River just by providing a heading for us to fly, regardless if the river is visible or not. The big question is, will the heading that the controller assigns us be over the river? I can only hope for that as we descend lower and lower as we set up for the downwind leg to runway 22. Remember, I'm seated on the right side of the plane just for the view when flying north on the Hudson. Tension is high now. There are no landmarks outside to look at. I can't tell how high we are, but based on the time, we should be over New York Bay at this moment. We should be on the ground in 7 minutes, so we've got to be around lower Manhattan. Where is it? Will the clouds give way? Suddenly, after traveling in a cloud of gray, I rejoiced in the fact that my seat selection on the right side of the plane is going to pay off. Here's Manhattan as seen from the Hudson River. What a rewarding view. And it's not over yet. There's more Manhattan down there, but in the distance, I can see LaGuardia. We're looking down runway 13 and can see a plane taking off on it away from us, which is the reason why we're west of the airport. We'll be on the crossing runway, runway 22 soon. Our actual heading takes us directly over the upper reaches of Manhattan, making the rest of it hard to see, but our downwind leg gives us a perfect view of the Bronx. We'll fly northbound here on the Bronx's west side, and in a few minutes, while on final approach, we'll fly southbound on the Bronx's east side. So the question is, if we can see the airport now, when can we land there? If we descended rapidly, we could make a right turn and land on runway 22, but that can't happen. Why? Well, we're not alone up here, and we need to fit into the pattern of arriving flights. As a matter of fact, the heading that we're assigned while viewing Manhattan wasn't designed to just give us right-side passengers a good view. It was designed to keep us in line with other planes on the same route. And it's only once we're past Manhattan that we can descend to allow lower altitude sightseeing flights over the Hudson. But how far out we continue to the north depends on how many planes there are in front of us. The controller must keep us in line with all of the planes in the pattern. Our turn back around depends on two factors: who's in front of us doing what we're doing now, and who's coming straight into runway 22 from the north. There are two principal flows of traffic to runway 22. Ours is the primary flow, with the most arrivals coming from our direction, but some flights come in from the north. The controller must turn planes from our direction to the right. How far out we go depends on how many planes there are to provide safe separation, and if planes are coming straight in, we'll have to either turn before or after them, depending on which turn provides the safest distance between the two planes. We've flown the length of the Bronx and are now in Westchester County. Our heading has taken us slightly east of the Hudson River, so passengers on the left side of the plane can see both banks of the river. We're overflying Yonkers, New York, and way out in the distance is Long Island Sound. We'll be following that shoreline down to the runway, and the controller has recognized that we can now turn to the right, so a right turn is issued because the spacing now allows for sufficient spacing between us and the plane in front of us. We're also told to descend to a lower altitude. The east-west road down there is the Cross County Parkway, which runs across lower Westchester County. Once we complete the turn, we'll be headed right for the final approach course. Planes from the north will be on the final approach course from our left to our right, and planes that come from the south will be doing what we're doing at various places across Westchester County, depending on how busy the airport is. The road that intersects with the Cross County below is the Bronxville Parkway. It roughly separates Westchester in half. We can now, for the very first time, see the Hudson River we traveled north on, and in the distance are the skyscrapers of Manhattan. We were just by them about 3.5 minutes ago. We've come so far, so fast. We're approximately at a 90-degree angle to the final approach course to runway 22, and turning right at a 90-degree angle onto the final approach course will be too tight of a turn, and we could possibly overshoot. So we'll be making a series of right-hand turns to intercept the final approach course as instructed by the approach controller as we descend even lower. With good visibility here over New Rochelle, New York, we could be cleared for a visual approach to runway 22 or even follow the aircraft ahead of us down to the runway. No matter what kind of approach we do, visual or instrument landing, we will wind up on a heading of 225 degrees, which leads right down to the runway while we descend on the Bronx's east side. With around 4 minutes until we're on runway 22, the approach controller gives us clearance for the runway 22 approach as we passengers wind up our tour of southern Westchester County from the right side of the plane. Just final alignment needs to be made over New Rochelle, and just after that, we'll be back in the Bronx. The approach controller then tells us to switch radio frequencies to 118.7, the control tower frequency where we'll check in with the tower. The tower controller will assess the airport's ecosystem and how we fit in and provide us with clearance to land. We're about to line up with the runway, and as the wing dips, we can see Interstate 95 down there. You'll recall we saw it at the 8-minute 20-second mark of this video when we took off from Palm Beach. The road extends all the way up here and even continues on to Maine where it terminates. I'm happier I flew to New York instead of driving. As the right wing goes up, we're aligned with runway 22 as we enter the Bronx for the second time. We're headed to a runway that intersects with runway 13 as we saw from over Manhattan earlier, and there's enough time for the controller to issue takeoff clearance to several planes on runway 13 before we land. Generally, as soon as a plane lands on runway 22 and passes through the intersection with runway 13, a plane on runway 13 is issued takeoff clearance. As a matter of fact, in a few moments, when we touch down on runway 22 and pass through the intersection with runway 13, you will see a Southwest 737 holding a position on runway 13, waiting for us before he can be issued takeoff clearance. That plane, like all planes this afternoon, will start its climb to the east of LaGuardia, gaining altitude, but what happens if this plane has to fly out to the west, say to Chicago's Midway Airport? Well, once altitude is achieved to the west of LaGuardia, the plane, under guidance of the departure controller, can turn to the left, to the west, and climb over us and other planes on the final approach course to runway 22. They'll be at least 5,000 feet or higher by that point and won't have any conflict with arrivals at all. Everything is so well coordinated with the help of these procedures and air traffic controllers. There's even aircraft that are taking off from Newark Airport that are headed to the northeast that are flying over these arrivals to runway 22 like us. At a higher level, there are aircraft that are arriving to JFK Airport. And above that, aircraft are being controlled by the Air Route Traffic Control Center for high-altitude flights that are just passing through the airspace. Of course, there are other types of operations, but there's not enough time to mention them all. We're going to land pretty soon. just pulled into the gate here at LaGuardia Airport. What a great flight. You know, every single flight is unique. I do fly up the river often to runway 22, and this time we broke out between downtown and midtown. We were really close to those tall buildings. Great approach. Okay, I'm gonna end the video here. Thank you so much for joining me on this flight from PBI to LaGuardia. If you're not a subscriber to my channel, I invite you to click on the subscribe button, click the bell button, and rest assured, I'll be back with many more videos like this. Thanks everybody. See you all very soon on the plane.